Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Equine Episode Examination, where today we'll be discussing the newest MOP Season 7 episode that premiered this past weekend, Campfire Tales. So this is your first time joining us for Triple E. As I said, we'll be discussing that new episode today. Pretty much a group roundtable discussion here with everyone both in the call and in chat. We'll talk about the episode, give our opinions of it, have a discussion of it, and kind of get everyone's take on the episode itself. If you're watching this in a recording, we do record this live on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, usually. So if you want to join in the chat and the discussion for a future episode, make sure to stop on by CinemaQuestria.com at that time, so you can participate in the chat. Or if you're watching this live somewhere else and you're not on CinemaQuestria.com and you want to participate in the chat, head on over to CinemaQuestria.com. You can view the stream there, as well as join our Discord chat there and participate in the discussion as well, because we do have a lot to discuss with this episode today. I guess if we want to introduce ourselves really quick, I'm Ran Shadow.
Hey guys, it's Mr. Ben.
This is J.D. Smith, and submitted for approval of the Midnight Society. I call this the tale of the MLP Campfire Tales. Oops, wrong series.
And I'm the equestrian hero they never talked about.
I don't think like world's most flatulent horse is like a title worthy of praise, man.
I thought you were going to say most British horse, but you know.
I believe that goes to Pip.
Well, I don't know. It's between Pip, Dr. Hooves, and Octavia. They're all pretty British.
They're pretty. I don't know. I think Octavia and Dr. Hooves are British, but I think Pip is like outrageously British.
No, Pip is the American's ideal of what a British person is.
Yeah, exactly. Like characterized British, yeah.
British.
Like characterized British, yeah.
Not to mention that Pip's accent it mysteriously disappears in his first episode, but then again, he gets it back all the time for all his later appearances.
Anyway,
like Bonbon, where he has a different voice every episode.
So yeah, Campfire Tales is today's episode. It's kind of, we're gonna have to kind of do something a little different here with this, because as we know, before we get to our initial thoughts on the episode, this episode was actually sort of 3 short stories packaged together into an episode as told by the three older sisters of the main 6 there. So I had to definitely do something a little different here. So we're going to start by just kind of discussing the overall story and stuff like that, the overarching kind of device they use to frame all of these stories together. And then we're going to go to each story individually, and in each individual story, we'll discuss the story and the characters in that story. And then we'll go back to a broad overview and discuss the humor and animation and music and stuff like that as a whole after that. So that's kind of the plan, since it is a little bit sort of a different episode than we're really used to. And on that, what are everyone's initial thoughts on the episode as a whole here?
It's interesting to get some integration into the comics, even though it's not like an actual. I mean, I've only read like the Rockhoof one. From what I understand, the other 2 ones, the Flash Magnus one and the Mistman one, are also comics in their own right, but I haven't actually read that one. From what I understand, I know that the comic ones kind of partly follow the same things as what the show here does, but not to the same full degree. But still, it's kind of interesting, because we finally get some sort of a statement here, because I understand that we had some sort of a statement from like early on that the comics will actually tie into season 7 at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And we're finally getting that sort of payoff at this point.
Yeah, specifically the Legends of Equestria one, or whatever it's called, was the one that was going to tie into it. So it seems to be what this episode was. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting episode. I mean, like I said, it was much different than episodes we're normally doing. Was pretty much not really focused on any of the core characters. And we know most of the stories, of course, were just based on in legend and new characters, and in that aspect. And it was definitely a lot different having these sort of 3, 5 to 6 minute stories within the episode, completely separate from one another, and then kind of framed around, of course, this campfire thing, which is something really that the show hasn't done before. I think the closest thing that the show has done to that would have been the Cutie Mark Chronicles, and even that they had the stories tied together all in the same way, and all kind of came together in the end because of how that story worked. So still a lot different from that in that aspect.
The other thing I will say about the IDW tie-in, I've not really read a huge amount into it because I no longer really have that much interest in the comics myself. That's for personal reasons, but also just basically time reasons as well. I mean, the amount of things I've been doing, I just don't have the time to read them all. But from what I hear, whilst they do tie in quite fairly neatly with the stories, you don't necessarily have to read them to understand the stories here, which I think was always going to be the case. They tie in slightly closer, but they're still sort of an optional thing if you want more information on these legends that we see in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, the legends in the episode here are pretty quickly told, because they only have 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes to tell each of these stories here. So they kind of do go through it at a pretty brisk pace, whereas the comics dive a little bit further into it, just again because each comic is devoted to a story in itself.
That's definitely where you should handle supplementary media.
I agree.
Comics, and say the novels as well. Like the ones written by G.M. Barrow and that. I think that is what it shouldn't be necessary to actually have to read or look at the supplementary material to understand the show. But if you want a deeper understanding, I think it's fine. I've got no issue with it.
Well, I mean, yeah, normally rated. I guess it's nice how they can do that, because when you have 3 stories, that literally works in perfectly with the act timing of the show. You get before the opening credits to set up everything, then you got the first act, second act, and third act in between all the commercials, and each of those stories fits nicely into there. So, and in terms of structure-wise, it fit really well into a 22-minute sort of TV structure.
I'll say this now, it'll fit terribly when it's shown on British television, because we don't have 3 ad breaks per 22-minute episode. We only have one in the middle, so that's going to split the episode up horribly.
Yeah, I'm assuming they'd probably have to put it after the second story, unless they oddly cut in the middle of the second story, because
I'll tell you now, if I do ever if I remember rightly, they do abruptly cut it in slightly odd places, if I remember rightly. But it's also the case with other shows. I know for a fact The Simpsons, they do the same thing. So it's just the quirk of how obviously we have slightly longer ad breaks, I would say, but they're less frequent here in the UK. So
yeah. So moving on to the story and the writing of the episode. This episode was written by 2 new writers who I didn't grab their names beforehand, so yay.
Hang on. I can get them. It's Barry Safchik and Michael Platt.
Yep. And so they this is really their first thing they've written for sort of TV animation, or really kids television. They produced a lot of shows and written for a lot of those shows as well. I think one of the bigger shows that they worked on was writing and producing and story editing for some time. I'm not sure, it wasn't the whole series run, but for part of it, the TV show Weeds, which is about as far away from MLP as you can get. So it was definitely interesting seeing them coming, and I mean, kind of, you wonder how some of these writers find their way onto the show. Like, you can understand maybe like something like some of these writers that have written for The Loud House or something like that.
Oh, I don't know.
How they can
I don't
work
know,
their
Rain.
way over.
I don't know, Rain. I would say that Pony is one hell of a drug.
God, it certainly is addicting. But yeah, I kind of wonder like how, with the stories, how they got involved in writing writing this episode and writing for the show. Just given their past work history and stuff. But yeah, I think they did a pretty good job. I think this is probably one of the easier episodes to write, I would say, in terms of a new writer, because you kind of have a little bit more freedom, I would say, because it's not like you're writing. You're not
for the smaller stories, but they still the framing device still requires.
Yeah,
some
but
sort of knowledge
compared to some other previous episodes that new writers have taken on, where you're diving into big things with characters and character development, and meeting parents and stuff like that. Think these big character episodes like that, I think, is a little bit more challenging. When you have something like this and you're pretty much writing for new material, I don't think you don't quite have as much to worry about, which is nice. But yeah, like Matt said, I think the overall framing device itself was still very much like a lot of other episodes in this season, ingrained with a lot of continuity, which was great.
That seems to be a very big Joanne and Christine's tenure as story editors here. Not that wasn't the case before, and I think sort of one of the writers that sort of championed that, I think, the most, first of all, that a lot of people really certainly took notice of, was obviously Larson. And it's kind of ironic that he comes back when they are actually now obviously story editors, and it's funny because I like it, so see why some people may find it an issue going forward, because the more continuity you push into the show, the more it's a case of, well, you really need to watch these episodes first before episodes, and that makes it a very difficult show for a TV station to show, say, randomly or out of order or anything, which,
But I would say there is a little bit different than something like a serialized show. Well, but I think there is a difference between like a serialized show where every episode, like maybe like a lot of Steven Universe's episodes, where every episode flows into a lot of the when all the episodes sort of flow into one another and they're kind of almost one continuous story. I think even with the continuity they've added, it's sort of like a bonus if you get a better understanding, or you get more out of it if you know worse. That's my train of thought. Yeah, when you know where they're coming from with a lot of with the writing that they're doing. So it's not like it's you need to know a lot of these continuity things they're doing, but it does help if you're watching the episode and you sort of can see where the characters are coming from, or see where they've been to before, and how that's affecting them in the situation now.
It's interesting to know that the show is considered essentially high fantasy, which that means is basically a fantasy, with a lot of deep sort of story to it, and this only really adds to that. It adds to the mythos of basically Equestria by adding equestrian legends and how stories and that are passed down, and it just fascinates me that the show is still finding ways to have engaging stories without necessarily even having to use any of the characters that the show originally set up and brought around, and that is a healthy sign for going into the I mean, considering we already know there's going to be an 8th season, and I don't worry about that. I relish the opportunity.
And yeah, it's definitely something that they've been really strong at this season. Like Matt said, I think Emma Larson was one of the first writers to really bring a lot of continuity into the series. I mean, with episodes earlier, such as the Cutie Mark Chronicles, and then like in season 2 when you have Luna Eclipsed, bringing Luna back and sort of integrating her into the show there. I think he was sort of one of the first writers that really started doing that, and we started seeing that more and more as the show go on. And he would write a lot of the episodes that had a lot of continuity or characters being brought back, like in season 3 with the Trixie episode there. And going forward, and when he became story editor going into season 5, I think a lot of that even became even more self-apparent. And I think the show has just increased in terms of its continuity and the importance that continuity is for the show, and having good callbacks or bringing back known characters or situations or locations. We saw it a lot in season 5. We saw it even more in season 6, and now even more in season 7. So I think it's a great thing. And of course, what we're talking about here, because we haven't really explicitly stated here, was this whole camping trip that is the framing device for all these short stories in the episode. This episode is pretty much a direct sort of sequel, continuation of the season 3 episode, Sleepless in Ponyville, where, of course, all just like this, all of the sisters and siblings here all got together to go on a camping trip. And so we had something similar here, and they even mentioned that this sort of become an annual thing for them now to do and go out. And it was a nice way to frame it. It was a nice way to kind of have a reason to tell these stories, because obviously camping out is telling stories around the campfire is something traditional, so it would make sense that they would do that. And why are they going camping? Oh, because they did it before. Now it's an annual thing, because they're they have these these sisters get together every year. So I think it was a really good way to frame this story, because anytime you have an episode like this where they just randomly kind of spout 3 stories that really have nothing to do with anything as far as we know right now, it can be a little weird and kind of come out of left field. But I think that framing device that they used here definitely helped with that and made it seem a little more cohesive.
I also like how they kind of name dropped a couple of areas, or at least one that we haven't yet been to. Sorry, just kind of got attacked by a yawn mid-min. I am gonna kill you. Anyway, but yeah, we heard the name Luna Bay. Now it was actually on the official MLP map, but we've never actually been there. We've never otherwise heard anything about it.
I didn't even realize they mentioned it in the episode.
Yeah, it was where the flighters normally congregate around.
Okay.
They said apparently they're kind of displaced because possibly they were attracted by the campers' food. So something like that.
It's not just. You sure Luna Bay is not just a shipping name for Luna and Michael Bay? One true pair.
Oh dear God, I hope not.
The explosions have been doubled.
Let's just say that explosive. Puts on my sunglasses.
Gosh, that's almost as bad as puns in the Mario Rabbids game.
Yeah, but that's funny.
But yeah, I think the story kind of flowed really well. They had all these little interludes between each of the stories where we get some nice character interaction between the sisters, and the story, the sort of pseudo story that they have that's framing it progresses as they're trying to get away from the Flydars. And then, eventually get to the Winsome Falls at the end. So I think the overarching story was fine. It did its job of sort of providing a reason for the 3 stories to be told. And, yeah, I mean...
I have a question.
Sure.
It's about the Flydars. If you make a radar that finds exclusively Flydars, would it be called a Flydar?
Oh, God.
I'll see myself out.
I guess really another thing we can talk about in terms of the the overall arching story of the episode is the sisters themselves and the characters and how they were written, because there's not really much else I think to the story overall. So but we did see some interaction with the characters. So how did everyone feel about their with the sisters' characterization in this?
It was really good to see Rainbow Dash just kind of, considering that she's, dealt with Fluttershy from like season 1. It was really nice to see Fluttershy. Not Fluttershy. Blah. It was really nice to, yeah. It was really nice.
I know
to
those
see Rainbow
Pegasi all
Dash.
look alike.
Yeah, man. It's like freaking. Starlight and Twilight and everything light and this light and that light and I want to say something else light, but it's otherwise not safe for work.
Flashlight.
And he says that too, yeah. Well,
but continue.
It's really nice to see, Rainbow Dash just being extremely patient and gentle with Scootaloo, even in the midst of Scoot's panicking, opting to soothe and comfort her rather than just, rolling her eyes and being exasperated. I mean, there's even a point where Rainbow Dash even lets Scootaloo sit on her belly as a raft while, they're heading down the cave river at, near the end of the episode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's kind of like, I think that was one of the neatest things to see in the overarching part of this episode, being that how we talked before about how this episode related to the season 3 episode Sleepless in Ponyville, and of course that was a big episode for Scootaloo and Rainbow Dash as well there. So kind of seeing how they've progressed since season 3 there and how closer they've grown as sort of adopted sisters there was really cool. Yeah.
You see, the thing I have to now wonder now, who's the biggest chicken, Scootaloo or Fluttershy? I mean, I know Scootaloo is a chicken, but
Why would Fluttershy be more of a chicken than Scootaloo? We already know that Fluttershy stood up to the cockatrice while Scootaloo just chickened.
No, Fluttershy's getting less of a chicken, and on because she's getting more assertive.
But yeah, no, I mean it is really nice to see how far the adoptive sister relationship between Scootaloo and Rainbow Dash has come on, and this is sort of the end for Sleepless in Ponyville, and I really enjoy that, and whether we'll ever find out about Scootaloo's family, this is a question that's even more. It's almost as long and winding as the path to Applejack's parents. And hey, that happened this season, so never say never.
Yeah, I think. Come on, Joanne and Christine have to leave a few questions for later seasons.
No, they have to answer every question that's ever been asked by the fandom by the time that they finish their tenure as things. So the new created. I am joking, by the way.
And, like Radio Dog said there too, it was seeing Sweetie Belle's magic again continuing to improve since season 3, where she couldn't really use magic at all, and we've sort of seen that her be able to do more and more of that over the past few seasons, and we can see her having that little magical shield or bubble or whatever that she has to ward off the Flydars there. Well, the thing with Scootaloo is, I mean, they pretty much, they got pretty close to saying stuff like that. Either her parents are gone, have given her up, or just extremely inattentive, as just given what we saw in the episode this season where we met Rainbow Dash's parents there. It was nice seeing some of the other sisters, continuing to bond as well in the episodes, such as Rarity and Sweetie Belle, and of course that was a much bigger plot point all the way back in season 2 for the Sisterhood of Social in that episode, and we've seen them grow and in farther episodes this season, and getting to see them sort of get along really well, and Sweetie Belle really reacting to
this time.
I really did like that. I love that reference to the direct references they had at the beginning to their previous camping trip in season 3. Like that was pretty funny. And Sweetie Belle still carrying everything, even if it wasn't as much as last time. But yeah, having Sweetie Belle like really enjoying the story, and I think one of my favorites is definitely Apple Bloom and kind of her like reaction, because she's heard the story that Applejack's telling before, and just having her reaction. It's almost like one of those things where you've seen like something, maybe like something we're showing here before, and everyone else is watching it for the first time, and you guys like, oh my god, you're gonna love this growing up. I really like that, the reaction that she had there, and you can really see how strong like a bond they have as sisters, and with these stories that they've told before.
You have no idea how much I was trying not to marry and wrap up.
At least we're about at the same place.
Well, we are now.
For now, and then I'm gonna get ahead of you tonight.
Yeah, I have to sleep.
Yeah. No, you don't have to sleep. No, just stay up all night and then go do your 12-hour shift. Yeah, I'm sure that'll work out fine.
Yeah, that'll work fine.
What could possibly go wrong? Here we go.
Don't remind me that's coming out later this year.
What could possibly go wrong?
It's coming out on Halloween as well. That's the release date. Oh my god.
The day the world ends. Oh.
I still can't believe that of all things is getting a physical release, and yet Sonic Mania didn't.
Yeah, I know. I'm so pissed off with that.
They knew Bubsy was horrible, so they picked the scariest day of the year to release it on.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I still can't. Yeah, that's on the PlayStation 4. But Sonic Mania, nope. You get a download code and you be happy.
At least you get at least they gave us the giant Sonic statues if you bought the collector's edition at least.
Wouldn't you consider how much the blooming collector's edition cost to give you something that's substantial?
So, anything else that anyone wants to discuss with the story or the characters and the overarching connected, plot here before we get to the specific stories?
I do, yeah. I mean, I do also like how much more helpful Rainbow is. I would say, because normally Rainbow Dash is like all ego, but not necessarily like she don't necessarily always go out for someone else. Although I suppose you could say some of her loyalty to that is like a degree to that. I just find it funny. She, they're like, we haven't got a fire in here, so Rainbow Dash is like, oh fine, fuck it, I'll risk like being stung like thousands of times just to get this fire, and yeah, she pretty much does get stung just to get that fire.
Well, of course, when we get to Rainbow Dash's story, everyone's like, you can't just tell a story about yourself. I know I'm pretty awesome, but. So they kind of play with that there too. Okay, so we can dive into the first of the 3 stories here, and that is the Legend of Rockhoof. Pretty much, I guess the story is pretty much a lot like Hercules in a lot of ways. I think there's another story it's similar to where someone actually does. Isn't there an actual like real story where someone does like dig a trench really quick to get lava around? Maybe I'm thinking of something else. I don't know. I know I've seen that before.
I know Aang did something like that in the Avatar Last
that's
Airbender.
what I'm thinking of. Yeah, I'm thinking of Aang doing that in that episode. Yeah. So what does everyone think about the first short story here?
I agree mainly with Tim. It's very simple. It's very diligent hero work, straight up, reward on that. You know, guy wants to join, the resplendent military or some sort of royal guard, and has to prove his mettle effectively.
Yeah, the simplicity, I can see why someone like Applejack would enjoy that sort of story. Because she's a simple pony, and I don't mean that in a nasty way. She
Window.
she likes things. Anyway, as I was saying, she doesn't like a story where it like there's like a lot of egotism or a lot of showing off. She's a much more practical pony, and therefore a lot of these stories that she's probably likely going to be tell are going to be much more straight to the point, which is what this story was. It may not be like the most exciting story ever, but it served its purpose and told a good message. So it was fine.
Yeah, I mean, of course, this story also dealt, with him having strength, and that makes sense for like an Earth pony. It was a very Earth pony story, I think, and that's something that I think we can really see through each of the stories as we progress. Is these are like stories and legends from each of those three pony races. So Applejack's story revolves around an Earth pony getting super strong and using his super strength and perseverance to save the town. That the next one deals with unicorns, and the final story, of course, deals with Pegasi and a Pegasi battalion as well.
In a Rainbow Dash, insert fanfiction.
Yeah. So yeah. So that's definitely a good point to make in terms of how these stories and legends sort of come about. They're definitely ingrained within each of these separate pony races here. I think it's something else that's neat about this episode is again how everything here is sort of new, because none of these stories are very continuous with anything we've seen in the show before, and each one's very self-contained. But it does provide us a lot more in terms of lore and world building. Whether or not these things actually happened, they are legends after all. But legends in this world seem to be more often than not true, such as Mare in the Moon was thought to just be a legend and back in season 1, and of course that was actually true. So I think a lot of these legends are things that, especially in this world, could actually happen, even if they might be a little exaggerated or dramatized or whatever. But regardless of whether or not these things actually happened, it is still some nice additional lore, and we get to see different places as well in each of these stories that we haven't seen before. With this one taking place at a volcano somewhere on an island.
I've heard of the legend of the background pony called Applejack. Some say if you look hard enough, you can see her.
The greatest legend of all.
Did they mention like what the place was called, what the village was called at all in the episode?
I don't recall.
It was probably Apple something. I'm joking. I can't remember if they did say or not.
Because if it was something like a volcanic island, like I don't know if it was. I'm trying to think of where maybe it would be on the Equestrian map. Maybe like off
It was the island of Burke. No.
I was just gonna say it was Lava Reef.
It could be further off on the like western side, like it could like around where Hawaii would be in our world. That would make sense, actually. Doesn't really make sense for the type of ponies on the island, but
Ah, yes, the dreaded island of Noname.
No. That's brilliant.
Yeah, definitely some, of course, some similarities to Pompeii as well, given the volcano.
Or would that be Nanami? I don't know.
Unfortunately, in Pompeii, they didn't have someone that was able to dig a giant trench to the water.
You need to put a fancy accent on the E, so it seems more fancy.
I mean, what are you gonna do? I mean, would it have been better of them to force the ponies into there if they didn't want to go, or it's I mean, we could have the same discussion about the hurricane in Texas that happened right now, and of course, with any hurricane, there's always people that don't evacuate and people that do evacuate. And whether or not you force these people to evacuate or not, knowing full well that there's a good chance they might not survive if they don't. Do you honor their personal freedom and their personal choices to do that, and they have to accept their own fate that they do, or do you physically force them in order to save their lives and do something that maybe they're not going to like or goes against what they believe or want? It's a similar thing to the in The Incredibles, where Mr. Incredible saved the guy that was trying to commit suicide by jumping off a building. I saved your life. No, you ruined my death.
I wanted to die spectacularly. But yeah, the thing is though, sometimes in life you'll have choices forced to like it or not, and sometimes you have to make the choice yourself. And sometimes you'll make the right choice, and sometimes you won't, and sometimes you'll be forced into the wrong choice. But you've got to make the most of it, and that's what life is. And sometimes it'll deal you a shit hand, and sometimes you get lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, it's going to be the former, not necessarily the latter.
Yeah, I would say that those Legend comics, the 3 that were referenced in this episode, could be considered canon now. I think this episode is pretty much legitimately, its point was to canonize those, and they said that they tie together. These ones were specifically written to tie together, and so it isn't like other comics where it's not canon unless the show says it. When the show has actually said this is canon, so we yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of before, the amount of canonicity, is that a word?
It is now.
The amount of canonicity the comics had was very much up for debate. But regardless of how I feel about the comics in terms of their quality or anything else, the stories that they've released in this Legend of Equestria series seem very much more to be tied to the show than ever before. So all I'll say is IDW, don't fuck it up.
It pretty much
So
seems
far,
like
apparently
these were.
so.
I'm assuming that these were probably developed and from what I've heard from interviews, these were developed in the show, and the stories were developed in the show, and obviously the IDW writers got early copies of the script then to do their stuff and expand upon it then, which I think is a good way to go.
Well, it's the only way you can do it, really. And
well, I mean, they could have had the
before
IDW comics written first and then based an episode based on those, but yeah, that wouldn't work as well.
Yeah, but then you'd have episodes written by Ted Anderson. No thanks.
Anything for the characters in this particular and their characterization in this particular story?
It is interesting how the main characters for each of these stories are in somewhat of a reflection of the characters, telling the story. So, we have the main character here who's, very much like Applejack in being
loyal,
quite straight beat. Well, you could make it.
I'm doing the old joke of Applejack and Rainbow Dash being interchangeable.
To be fair, in a way, I actually do think they could be the other way around, and it would fit just as well, if not better. But anyway, Why, it's basically a case of, it's a reflection of their personality, and you can understand why that, Applejack would like the story because, she can find it quite relatable.
And
It's
not to
sort of
mention the
similar in a
village.
way to how yes, a lot of people would say that a lot of the reason why like X, Y, or Z pony is their favorite character or pony in the show is because they have they can relate to them, or they find them relatable.
And I think that's it's something we can also see relatable in the story is they're all a village, but they're a very close knit village because they're on an island. Yeah, and so they're a lot more like family, which I think is something that Applejack obviously would be able to relate to in the story, and not wanting to leave home or abandon what your home or your family, and doing anything to fight for your family as well, like Rockhoof did.
Well, Applejack would also very strongly feel for that, because when she obviously went off to try and make her own way in the world, away from the farm, she essentially got basically homesick and wanted to go back.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is kind of I think this is a good I think this is again where the I think this is kind of also where again the alternate names for the elements that we got in season 3 again fit a lot better to the characters, where Applejack's was in integrity, which I think we could also apply much better to this story that she's telling more than honesty.
I think it's just more proof that each of these characters can't really be defined by one or two traits now, although they're a lot more fleshed out than that. And like I say, I think it was a very bold decision to get rid of the elements almost entirely now, and I think it was quite possibly one of Megan McCarthy's best ever decisions for the show, at least for the show going forward anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I like a pretty much like force. Yeah, we can't use the elements of harmony to do everything now.
We'll have to make our own Deus Ex Machina with blackjack and hookers.
We're gonna throw hookers in the blackjack. Yeah, screw the whole thing.
Screw the hookers?
Oops. I misquoted that. Oops.
With Applejack and hookers. Anything else anyone wants to discuss with the story and or the characters in it? I think this was kind of one of the most standard in terms of how legends go. I mean, this is, like I said, this is very similar to a lot of other actual legends in real life here that we've seen. So now we can move on to the second short story here. The oops. Hold on. Make sure that actually took there. Of course, the story of this is the story of Mistmane. So yeah, what did everyone think about the story of Mistmane?
It's very interesting how we finally get to see some sort of an Asian equivalent in MLP here.
Specifically off of China, no less.
Yeah,
Oscar Sombra. Considering he has a similar kind of horn design.
Asian.
You had canon Sombra as Chinese.
So yeah, curved horns are canon now. Yeah, and like Tim mentioned, it's kind of funny that we mentioned Avatar earlier, because I definitely got a very much Avatar distinct feeling between when Mistmane was going up against her one friend. What was her name? Sable Spirit.
Yeah.
Very much Avatar Roku versus Fire Lord Sozin.
Yeah, I
that
really...
reference went over my head. because I'm terrible because I've still not seen Avatar or the Korra.
Tisk tisk.
You're missing out, man.
Yeah. I definitely think I think most people are probably in agreement that this is the best of the three in every aspect.
The music
it's
is
definitely the
freaking
most
amazing.
it's the most inspired. It's definitely the one where we see the most different location and type of pony. We see, like we mentioned, we see a completely different race sort of pony with these Asian unicorns here, and the setting of course matches that as well, with a lot of Chinese and Japanese inspired buildings and backgrounds. And so all of the new backgrounds and stuff that we had in here, all the new character designs and voices, we got that big battle scene, like Matt said, the music in it. I think this was definitely the most well done one, and it even had a really kind of good story for being so short. And yeah, this is one of the things, and throughout this episode, but especially this particular story as well, where you really just have to appreciate the amount of work that goes into these, and how much they had to design. It's a lot like the Heartswarming Tale episode back in last season. Again, because all these new backgrounds, all these new characters and effects, all these new things they had to build from the ground up. This isn't just them. You were using, the same locations or same assets to tell a new story here. This is all new stuff here, and it's one of the things I really liked about this episode, and more specifically this particular story as well, is just how different it all felt, and how much work obviously went into producing it. I just loved the different feel and different look that this story had. And I think this was also the most emotional one. Again, it was sort of a traditional sort of story. It's not breaking any new ground or telling something completely original. But I did think it was really well executed and had a really strong, of course, emotional core to it, as well as we see sort of what happened to Sable, and then we get to see Mistmane sort of making that sacrifice for her old friend there, and returning everything back to normal. And it had a lot of, much like, a lot of Asian-inspired media, it had a lot of sort of, I lost the word I was saying. Like a lot of visual metaphor and stuff in it as well. I think they did a really good job with this story, cramming so much into such a short time period. This one was definitely still the longest of the three stories of all of them. The first one was a little shorter because they had to fit the sort of opening and introduction in there. The second one, the final one, was also a little shorter, again because they had to stick the episode finale in there. This one had a little bit more time in the middle to be fleshed out, and I think that was good, because I think this had the best and most story to tell of the three of them. And it was cool because we got to see, this whole progress from early on with a younger Mistmane and stuff, her going away and coming back and having this confrontation and having the resolution to it, and then seeing sort of the aftermath of it. I think it was actually a really well executed short story that wasn't sort of like the first one where it's just kind of going through the motions of pretty generic story about some guy saving, finding the strength within himself. This one was a lot better executed, and of course just a lot more emotional and beautiful. And yep, like Tim said, going on the theme of each of these stories reflecting those who are telling them. This one, of course, is Rarity telling it, which makes sense, being that this whole episode or this whole short story revolves around beauty and also revolves around generosity, with giving up said beauty to help a friend and to help the village or the town or whatever. I think one of the things about this, and we'll get to this when we get to the moral at the end, I guess. Each of these things does have sort of a moral, each of these stories, but it's not sort of an in-your-face moral where you just have a character at the end say, be kind to others or something, whatever. It was definitely a lot more sort of, you have to absorb it by the actions that are going on throughout it about self-sacrifice and generosity and friendship and how friendship can transcend time, and how you can maybe help a friend who is in trouble here, like Asian Scootaloo here. Yeah, I totally agree with that DM12 too. I like the story's message about she wasn't just like defeating her old friend or taking over that and stuff. She saw that she was having an issue with the beauty and stuff, and she was so obsessed with it, and she gave her that beauty back and kept her as empress, but was able to impress upon her how to be sort of better at it and more generous with it.
In that image, she also turned her into an adult unicorn Scootaloo. At least that's what she looks like to me.
Oh yeah, the hair and everything too. Yeah. So what does everyone think of the characters in?
Miss Maine's best rarity.
Better rarity than rarity.
She out rarities rarities, except she's like Rarity but less of a drama queen.
Yeah. She gets like it's Rarity, except all that drama is turned into more generosity. Yeah, I guess you can kind of qualify Miss Main as sort of a Mary Sue in the story, but it's such a short story that I don't really know if you can expect much more from it in that aspect. I definitely think the villain was definitely a little more interesting in that regard, because we can sort of see her motivation behind it and sort of what she did, and then kind of come to that resolution and redemption then at the end there. Yep, I would agree there, Tim. And I think that's something that's pretty common in legends as well. I mean, yeah, in a lot of legends, especially short stories like this. Yeah. So, is there anything else that anyone want to discuss with the characters or the story of the second short story here? I did really like how we see at the end, even after she's sort of given up her beauty and revived her old friend's beauty. It was she still went around and was made it her mission to still go and beautify other things in and outside of that village there. Had a nice little ending. That this story definitely has a very much yin and yang to it as well, which is another very Asian thing to have. So it's very fitting for the story when you compare the two, you know, the antagonist and the protagonist in this story, and how one is of course giving beauty and the other one was taking beauty, and sort of who becomes more beautiful within that kind of stuff. It was a nice little kind of story structure for that and character structure, given the inspiration and the sort of motivations behind the design of it. See, I don't know if she's implied to die. I mean, everyone dies. Of course, she's going to die at some point, or old and frail. I don't know if I would say that the ending kind of made her dying. It was kind of right then and there. It was more showing her continuing to walk off into the sunset, and continuing to spread that beauty across the land until, of course, she eventually did die. Because I don't think that the spell that she's casting, or this whole thing that's going on here, was it really youth that she was that they were kind of distributing back and forth, or was it literally beauty? Because of course you can do something where Sable is taking all the youth from everyone, but it was shown not to be that, right? Because it was shown that she was taking beauty not just from other ponies, but taking it from physical objects as well, and making that's why the town is shown to be in that picture above there that Radio Dog linked is shown to be vibrant and beautiful, and then dull and depressing because she's hogging all the beauty for herself. So I don't necessarily think that because Mistmane gave up all of her beauty and now looks old and frail, I don't think that necessarily means that she is old and frail and near death. It just because it wasn't her life force or youth being pulled out of her. It was literally her beauty. So I don't really think that ending scene was supposed to be applying her walking off and dying right then. I think it was just more showing her continuing to go off and spread beauty throughout every place. Yeah, I definitely totally agree with you. It's unclear, and you can read into it in a lot of ways. I guess think that it's we shouldn't confuse her looking old for actually being old, because it was made pretty specifically clear that they were transferring beauty and not youth. And I really need to. I guess I really need to read the comics now. I guess maybe I should have read them going into this. Maybe I shouldn't have. I'm kind of happy I didn't because it made the episode more enjoyable probably. And now I can kind of go back and read an expanded story on them rather than the other way around. I did read the first Legends of Magic one, but that really didn't have anything to do with anything with this episode. So I'll have to go back and read the next ones when I get some free time. Yeah, and yeah, thanks for not spoiling it, because yeah, like me and Matt said, I don't think most of us here have read those, so I definitely something I do want to go and read myself. And I'm looking forward to reading that, just to kind of see how they expanded that then. Regardless though, it's still a very emotional ending to and beautiful ending to see her sort of walking into the sunset there, continuing to spread beauty and flowers all around her. I didn't mind the first one. I thought the first one was pretty good, so yay. I can't wait to read issue 2 then. Yeah, I think, and like I said, I think personally, I believe, and I think most people probably agree with this, that this was the best story overall, and I think in every aspect, this was the best of the 3 stories, and just very well executed. So
but it wasn't told by Applejack, so surely by default, it's not the best.
Well, obviously there's some things that come into play here that are just you don't speak of. But if I just let Applejack into every sort of contest, then there would be no contest. But yeah, moving on to the final story here, and this is the story of Flash, and no, not that Flash. This one isn't going to steer your way through.
I was just going to say, I've been looking forward to that self-insert fan fiction that Rainbow Dash said you was going to make all the way back in Spike at your service.
And she made sure it wasn't the Wonderbolts, but something almost like it. to avoid it being too obvious. Got to avoid those. I
was going to say to avoid the lawsuit.
Yeah. But yeah, the final story was pretty cool. I think it had a lot of cool aspects to it. It was definitely more interesting than the first one because of it. Most importantly, the dragons. It was cool to see a story taking place long ago and then involving dragons as well. One of the interesting aspects here is that we do see what looks to be Ember's father in this. And not only is it the same model and color and everything like that, obviously he doesn't speak in this, but he does have the same, when the dragons appear in this, and we'll get to this when we get to the music, but when the dragons appear, they actually have the same leitmotif that the father had back in Gauntlet of Fire last season, which kind of also may subtly confirm that it is, in fact, him that's fighting Flash Magnus here. I definitely have to agree with Tim on that. Just having this story that obviously takes place a long time ago and having the Pegasi have biplane sounds instead of jet sounds like we have in the current present time in Equestria was a nice touch. It makes absolutely zero sense in universe, but it was such a nice sort of touch to the sound design.
It's kind of funny because when we were watching the episode, I didn't even notice that until Tim pointed that out in chat, and then I actually had to listen for that, and I was like, oh yeah, that's actually pretty cool.
And I think that's one of the cool things about the sound design with the Pegasi is there's absolutely no reason for these Pegasi to be making jet sounds or biplane sounds or whatever when they're flying. But you just don't really notice it because they're flying and you're used to flying things making sounds like that now. And more importantly, it's subconscious, so now we don't even notice that they're making these sounds when they're flying like that or when the Wonderbolts are flying like that. And so when they bring in these biplane sounds, you probably don't notice it consciously. You notice it subconsciously, and your brain connects that to an older time. So it's a really nice bit of sound design that subconsciously connects this to the past in your brain. Well, we see a much better shot of much better shots of Torch there, where you can see it is the same, mechanically or not, whether it's him, it is the same exact design. Wonder if that's Ember's mother with him.
It's kind of funny because we've seen that that green dragon design before, all the way back in season 1. So that could possibly be Ember's mother, but I'm not entirely certain.
Did we? What episode did we see that in?
All's well that it ends well.
Oh, that's why I don't remember it. Okay. Of course, this one has a lot of the old legend tropes, like him getting the shield here, which is fireproof, and he's able to use that and his skills, flying skills, to defeat, and smarts, importantly, to defeat the dragon. I think that was kind of a cool thing for part of the story here, and that Rainbow Dash was sort of impressing upon Scootaloo there, in terms of using your smarts and your wits to overcome obstacles that you might not be able to overcome otherwise.
Rainbow Dash is smart. Wow. Amazing.
She's just so smart that she just looks dumb to everyone else because, yeah, she's just going around.
She's so smart. She's dumb.
Yes.
That makes sense.
That sounds like something Rainbow Dash would say about herself.
I'm so smart. I'm dumb. Just to make myself not look as bad.
Rainbow,
You
why
can't fool me. I'm a moron.
You look as bad.
Rainbow, what you fail that test? No, I'm just so smart. It just looks like I failed.
I did so well that I went round the other way and I only ended up getting 2 marks.
Yeah. And of course we see him shield surfing as well. Well, shield bouncing, I guess.
Flash Magnus's best link.
Why do all the Flash characters have like the same coat color?
Dun dun dun.
Obviously, this is an ancestor of Flash Sentry.
It was Flash Magnus voiced by Vincent Tong.
No.
Oh,
He's not a waifu
but come
stealer.
on! You only yeah,
Vincent Tong only voices waifu
before we
stealers.
Before we find out Flash Magnus is a waifu stealer.
He only voices waifu stealers like Flash Sentry and Featherbanks.
Oh God, Featherbanks, yes.
I still love that they cast him as the voice for Featherbanks.
They knew.
Yeah, they knew. That was definitely an intentional joke. So, what does everyone think about the story of this one here? Anything else on that, or maybe on Flash himself?
Flash is just Rainbow Dash fanfic insertation.
Yeah, this was kind of like a little more like a Legend Wonderbolt's tale, sort of like. It was a lot of similar to that, but obviously the context of it and stakes of it are a little bit more in line with like a legend. Yeah, I agree with that, Tim. It was like AJ's was more like a civilian stepping up to help. I mean, obviously they had sort of military people in that as well, ponies in that, who were trying to get them off the island. But then it was the civilian that stepped up and was strong and brave. Here we can see someone that is more militaristic, stepping up and being strong and brave as well. I did like how this particular message and how Rainbow Dash worked this message and worked this story into sort of teaching Scootaloo a lesson or trying to instill some more bravery in her as well. And sort of we see that later in the episode, telling her to be brave like Flash Magnus was. I did like how Rainbow was able to sort of weave that story into helping Scootaloo some more with her fears. Which is something I don't think we mentioned when we're doing the overarching thing in terms of continuity and having Scootaloo still being having these fears here, and another episode kind of focused on those. So yeah, she still hasn't gotten over stuff like that yet. Much like Fluttershy. And each story sort of was different in terms of the protagonist's relationship with the antagonist as well. In the first story, it was the protagonist going up against some unstoppable act of God, an unstoppable force here, where that was more or less the antagonist of that story. The second one, of course, was a literal, like I said, a yin and yang story, where we had a protagonist going up directly against an antagonist in a very personal battle, and then being able to sort of bring the antagonist around at the end. And then this story was more, it wasn't focused on the protagonist going up against sort of an act of nature or anything like that, but it was going up against a truly villainous force, at least in their eyes, where it isn't like Sable, or it wasn't like Miss May going up against her old friend Sable. Here it's going up against some big ferocious dragons. And of course now in the present day, in more recent episodes, we've gotten to know the dragons more, but back then, again, these ponies are very scared of them, and they're a very big threat, and they're probably both kind of scared of each other as well. So it's more about going up against force and not turning them, into good or anything like that, but instead just literally defeating them and having them go away.
There was quite a few new or voice actors that I've not seen before on that list.
Yep, yeah, that's one of the things that sort of we're talking about after the episode aired as well, was pretty much, I guess we'll get to that in voice acting, but yeah, pretty much all the other ones were new. So anything left that anyone wants to discuss, any lingering points in any part of the episode for the story or the characters that anyone want to discuss or that we missed before we move on?
I think I'm good.
We're good. You're done good.
Yeah, I can't think of anything either.
That'll do, big. So, let's see. Next, I believe we do have the voice acting anyway, so we can get into that. But yeah, like we were talking about a few seconds ago, the voice actors here, we actually had a lot of new ones. Pretty much anyone who wasn't one of the sisters was a new voice actor. They didn't get any of our veteran, I guess you could say, voice actors of the show to do any of the other voices there, even the ones that were already in the show. So we got a lot of new ones for the show. Sable Spirit was voiced by Alyssa Roteru. Flash Magnus was voiced by Giles Panton. Mist Mane was voiced by Alan Ray Hennessy. And Commander Ironhead, and as well as the Villager, was voiced by Paul Dobson, who is the brother of Michael Dobson, who of course has done a lot of voice work on Friendship is Magic already. But they were all new to the show. This is their first time acting on the show. And this is something I pointed out to Matt, I believe, at some point after the episode, was just how many of them were very excited to kind of be voice acting on Twitter and stuff, saying how excited they were that the episode aired, and was excited to hear the feedback from it, and maybe go to conventions in the future and stuff, and being part of the show now.
Oh, thank you.
it's always kind of something cool to see how all these voice actors don't just come on and just it's another job. They actually seem to be very invested in getting to do a voice on the show. Yeah, I think Sable Spirit and Mist Mains were definitely some of the best there. I really liked their work as those two respective characters. I gotta give Michelle Graber some credit too for her squealing as Apple Bloom trying to like fangirl over the story that Applejack is telling. That mixed with her face there was just priceless.
She was getting lessons from Rainbow Dash for how to fangirl. And I see that Scootaloo was getting lessons from Fluttershy on how to be a scaredy chicken.
Fluttershy should just, do the stare on her. That'll solve it.
Well, being a chicken, it would work perfectly.
Yeah. That's already canon. We already know it would. So, humor in each of these stories here. What did everyone think about the humor in the episode?
Let's see. Well, we didn't really.
Yeah, I think
a lot.
Yeah, I think most of the humor kind of resided in the overarching story versus in the actual stories themselves. If there was any humor at all in the actual stories, then they were pretty serious stories.
Let's say, well, we had Applejack being hogtied by Flighter's Silk, which was somewhat amusing.
Yep. I mean, like I was saying, I think most of the humor was in the overarching story versus the individual, because the individual stories, like I said, I don't even think there's anything in any of them that made me laugh. They were all pretty serious.
Let's say, yeah, there's one, like you was mentioning, kind of like in the overarching a little bit, where kind of like a transitioning one. There was like young Rockhoof screaming in fear when he sees the eruption of the volcano, but it's like kind of like followed up with like a zoom cut going to Apple Bloom just kind of squealing in glee about how the story's getting to her favorite part.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much the only one that I could really think of that's actually in the actual stories themselves.
Yeah, all these ones of Rainbow Dash and her most beautiful face there. I had a meme image that I posted before. At least I still got my winning personality. And yeah, Scootaloo crawling all over Rainbow Dash there, and pulling her mouth open. That's some good character interaction animation there.
Yeah, the Twilarina cameo with that's one of the things that I found both kind of humorous and kind of amazing because here it is, Rarity's apparently just a freaking master of shadow puppetry somehow.
With hooves. And of course,
yes.
And of course, we see her. She makes the Twi ballerina again. As if we already didn't see that enough this season.
How the hell did she manage to do that? And she actually had a freaking Twi ballerina puppet like stuffed up her, stuffed in one of the cases.
Magic.
She learned how to twist her hooves just like Pinkie Pie.
She learned from Lyra. Actually, yeah, Tim, I think that was a good one that I forgot to mention in the voice acting. That was that delivery of that no from Ashley Ball as Rainbow Dash. There was so great. Just yes, but you know who used to be the most? She used to be the most beautiful unicorn in all the land. No. And
Yeah,
Dash,
that's a good one right there too.
yeah, and Dash wants to have absolutely nothing to do with the story she's telling either.
So I also love the one little quip there about how the Cutie Mark Crusaders discuss how hard it would be for any of them to believe that any of their friends had gone evil. Sweetie Belle and Scootaloos are like, no, I can't believe that either of you have gone evil. And then Applebloom's like, I don't know. I've seen the two of you when you miss breakfast. And then they just both freaking glare at her. I'm like, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Kidding, not kidding.
Sorry, not sorry.
I was just about to say the same thing.
Oh.
Gosh, if she like weren't able to get any cider.
Dash would happily sacrifice all of her friends for some cider.
And the only thing she wouldn't sacrifice is herself because she loves herself too much.
And the kitchen sink. She needs that to wash dishes.
Oh, is that what she calls it now? Last week it was just to scrub up. Wink, nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
If she was invisible like Fluttershy, then she could watch people ink their splat zones. Oh, that oh my gosh, yeah, that face kind of I like that transition because of course Flash Magnus is making that same face there and it transitions to Dash there. I really like that face. It's such a satisfyingly smug face.
Sorry about that.
Anything else for humor?
I really can't think of anything in particular.
Mm-hmm. For animation and visuals, I guess I'll just kind of go off what I said earlier and just be very, very much amazed and impressed with just how much work goes into producing an episode like this, with all of the new locations and new ponies, and not just ponies, but new pony designs as well, and body types that we saw in the episode. Go to 3 different places. But one is in the cloud, so that the last one's a little bit easier. But 3 different places and villages, seeing the volcano explode, and of course again the whole second story and all of those sort of Asian-inspired backgrounds and buildings that they have there, all the interiors and exteriors, and all the different ponies there as well in that story. Just some beautiful lighting and beautiful layout and cinematography as well in that story. Yeah, and as we've seen, like they're really good with the faces in this episode. Okay, that picture that you linked there, Radio Dog, I'm not animating the GIF. I just see the still frame. It looks like Scootaloo caught Rainbow Dash like taking a piss in the woods. I saw that, and that's the first thing I thought of. Actually, it looks like Rainbow Dash has found the Nut Shack.
It's the Hay Shack. It's the Hay Shack. That smile on her face is like it's like, yeah, I know what I did and I'm proud of it. Perhaps Rainbow Dash it's going to be starring in the sequel to the video game A Dump in the Dark.
It's a video game?
Yes, look on Steam, it's real.
I don't think I want to, actually. I'll pass.
It's a game where you have to try and have a dump in the top.
I could guess that by the title.
It's a game where you literally have to do literal shit.
So you play as Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, they could rename it Patrick Stewart Simulator and it would still be accurate.
I'm really sad that we didn't get like a full-on Emoji Movie console game. I would have bought that.
No, because that would piss me off. Because that if that got a game and yet, like, say the MLP movie didn't, then you know.
But you don't want to play as shit. Voiced by Patrick
Well, I'm
Stewart.
sure there's. Is there any Star Trek: The Next Generation games? Because you could do it there then.
See, anything else for animation or visuals or humor that anyone has in their heads before we move on here?
I think we've pretty much said. I mean, the visuals in Rarity, the story that Rarity said was like the highlight easily.
Mm. Okay, let me get this to load. Oops, where is it? There it is. Yeah, like in every way, that second story was certainly the highlight there. Okay, so we'll move on here to the music and score, which is actually a lot to talk about here. So only got 7 tracks from this episode, but this episode actually has like 15 minutes of score in it total, which is the most from the season. Because each of the 3 stories pretty much has one like cohesive score to it. Like, so a lot of times they'll split stuff up into different tracks, but really each of those was kept as one score. So they run anywhere from 2.5 to 4.5 minutes, with the Mistbane one being the longest at 4.5 minutes there. And just the score in this was amazing. Each of the different stories has its own musical style and its own instrumentation, which matches it. Like of course, the first story has more of a sort of medieval score to it that we've heard, like with the dragons and some other stuff before in the series. The second one has very heavily Asian inspired score, Chinese and Japanese inspired score, and instruments that are used in it for that story as of course. And the last one has very march type militaristic Wonderbolt style score with a lot of heavy brass in it. So we get a lot of different, very unique styles of score for each of these, and especially in the second one is just some absolutely beautiful tracks. I do think that the Legend of Mist, the score for that scene is some of the most beautiful score that we've heard in the series. So we'll start off here with the first track here. It's pretty neatly divided how it kind of worked out for each of these tracks. You get a little introductory track as the main the sister is starting the story there, and then we work into the then we work into the actual score from the story itself, and back and forth, and we finally get to the ending track for the Winsome Falls there. So we'll start off here with the beginning of Applejack's tale here. It's when they first get into the cave to escape from the Flydars. They start telling the story, deciding they want to tell a story, and Applejack starts here. So it kind of begins with this really lovely, simple woodwind and glockenspiel cue, and then it shifts more orchestral as Applejack begins the tale to sort of get a little closer to the more orchestral score that we'll get when we get into the tale itself. So let's go ahead and we're gonna start that track here. And from there, we're going to go ahead and we get into the first tale, The Legend of Rockhoof. This is, I believe, the shortest one. This one's clocks in at, 2.5 minutes here? Just over 2.5 minutes for the Rockhoof tale. It begins again, like I said, with this more medieval style, similar to what we've heard in the dragons in the series before. It features a pan flute with that leads the main melody, and is backed by some like bongos to give it like more of a village vibe, and some subtle horns as well. Strings are brought in to emphasize Rockhoof trying to pick up the axe as we get to that part of the scene. Then the score kind of takes a dark and more action-style turn as the volcano erupts with more woodwinds as we focused on the village ponies not wanting to leave the island. As Rockhoof begins his crazy plan, the score picks up with some awesome action score and features some staccato string and brass as well as some woodwinds. It has a rhythm that's very similar to a lot of previous tracks in the series that are a similar sort of action score. Most notably part of the epic Shared Dream Suite from Season 5's Do Princesses Dream of Magic Sheep. That's part of the score from that big dream battle that they have in the last third of the episode there. It has a similar feel to that there. After Rockhoof saves the day, we return to that medieval score and exit Applejack's story. So let's go ahead and take a listen. Again, here with that medieval score. Here we get to that more action score here. Of course, we go back to the medieval sound here at the end. Oh, shoot. Okay, so now, next we go into the beginning of Rarity's tale here. So this is the start of, before the tale begins, when Rarity is just starting to introduce it. As she prepares to tell her story, she's accompanied by some really lovely harpsichord and harp, with the harp giving some nice arpeggios as she shows the gold specks in the rock in that scene. Some oboes and flutes are added when Rarity begins her story at the end there. I really like the oboe part there, because it has a little response from the flutes at the end there. It's a very nice sort of sound there. Here's that oboe and woodwind. And from there, we get into the biggest piece of score and the best piece of score from the best scene, The Legend of Mistmane. This one here clocks in at 4.5 minutes long total and goes through a lot of different parts. Pretty much all these are sort of suites of score, which comprise a lot of different cues as we go through each of these stories here. And this one is just absolutely a gorgeous track from beginning to end. Just like the setting of the short story itself, the instrumentation finds its inspiration in Asia and features a lot of Asian, Chinese, Japanese instruments, such as the Yang Quin and the Dizzy, and maybe some other ones or similar sounding ones to those. But those are the ones some of the more well-known ones that kind of give off the sounds from the instruments used in this. As Mistmane, and then we start off with this very more slow instrumentation using those instruments. But then as Mistmane returns home and finds the desolate state of things that have become of her home there, the score turns a little bit more emotional and melancholy, with some more strings thrown on top of the Dizzy to really push that emotional part of that scene. It then shifts to some more traditional Japanese music with this really slow, deliberate pace with a very, very prominent bass drum in that part. When Mistmane confronts Stable, who is now obsessed with taking away beauty from everything, the score really takes this darker turn while keeping with the Asian style, the Asian influence that it had. More strings are worked in for Sable's theme. You'll hear that as when Sable starts talking, you hear her theme. And then that continues while she's talking about what happened while Mistmane was away. It climaxes with more pan flute added on top right before the battle begins. During the battle, the score keeps a really woodwind-heavy instrumentation throughout the scene. So even though it's this really a little bit more action battle score, it still keeps the same kind of instrumentation from the rest of it, from the rest of the score in this story, allowing it to still mesh well with the rest of it, using this kind of the same instrumentation and whatnot that the previous ones does. After Mistmane defeats Sable, she uses her powers to bring beauty back to the kingdom, and this is my favorite part of the score. It's really, really beautiful during this part. It is accented by more strings and pan flute on top, with the pan flute taking over the melody as Sable is visibly touched by what her friend did to her. As the story ends, the score slows back down, just like it was at the beginning, to just the Yang Quin again, as we build, see the old and frail Mistmane walking into the sunset. So it becomes really slow and beautiful, and then it really slows down, and it's just kind of basic bare bones instrumentation with the Yang Quin and some percussion on top of it as we see her going into the distance there. And we talked a lot about similarities to Avatar and The Legend of Korra, and really I think the most similarities from that is definitely in the score. The track, all these different parts of this track you'll hear now just sounds like something that would have come out of either one of those series, with the score by the track team in those two series. It's really, really well done. It's really good. That I only mean that as the highest compliment to this score, and it really, really hits home the style and the setting of the scene that they have here. So I'll go ahead and put it on here. Here comes that emotional part. Now this one here, this track here, or this part of the track here is probably it literally sounds like it was pulled out of Avatar or Legend of Korra. This is really some of the same kind of score you would hear from the series. we're about to be introduced to Sable here. Now we're going to start to get into Sable's theme here. And I really, really like this part. I just love how much force it has behind it coming out here. Right here. Now we're going to get into the battle. So you can still hear that Malatit Dusmer in the background, the Yang Quinn. Now in this very fast-paced, more action score, still using again that same instrumentation for it to keep the same feel. From there we get to, I think, my favorite and most beautiful part of the song here. Up here, and now we get to the part of the story where it's talking about Mist Man continuing to go on and spread beauty, and she walks into the sunrise, and this is where again the score kind of pulls it back again, slows down, just has the very simple instrument and slow and deliberate instrumentation here. Like grain stick and stuff in the back, just absolutely gorgeous, and that's definitely just one of the best tracks in the series. And I mean, it's coming off some really good score from this season already in like the Princess's episode earlier this season and some of the other ones, but it's just really outdid. Wayne Manster and Kelly Davidson really outdid themselves with the score for this episode, and especially that scene there. And they really get to hit the nail on the head in terms of the style of it and the instrumentation of it and the execution of it as well. So just yeah, there was not. I was expecting the music in this episode to be good because I knew it was going to be this little short story one, and that gives Anderson a little more freedom to kind of experiment and do some different styles based on whatever the story is. And so I knew it was going to be kind of diverse, but I wasn't expecting, of course, I wasn't really expecting like an Asian-inspired sort of story and music to back that. And it really just went above and beyond a lot of the other score for it. And it's funny because you listen to that on its own, it's like, yeah, this is from a show called My Little Pony. And just amazing. And yeah, and that's another thing about that I really liked about these stories. As I was going through and listening to these stories again and trying to get the time codes to get all the episode titles and all the tracks separated, I was just like, oh man, this really is like really almost one consistent piece. It would be a shame to break this up into multiple things. I just hope it's not going to be another 6 or 7 minute long suite like the one from Do Princesses Dream Magic Sheep. Thankfully, it wasn't that long, but it was long enough. It was worth keeping together in that one, and just hearing that score go through all those different tones and then kind of end back where it started there was really great. So. Just I can't speak high. I could go on about this forever because I can't speak highly enough of that, but I just really have to give a lot of appreciation for the work that went into that score there and making that sound so great. But we're not even done yet. Maybe we should have saved that one for last. But we still have the Legend of Flash Magnus to get to here, the final of the 3 tales. This one is the second longest, coming in at about 4 minutes long, just under 4 minutes, I believe, like 3.5 minutes. Let's see. Yeah, 3 minutes and 45 seconds. So a little bit shorter than that one, but longer than the first one. So this one is, like I said, it's very similar to a lot of the Wonderbolt score, which makes sense, given that these are sort of like Wonderbolts before they're Wonderbolts. They're a very militia kind of group, so it makes sense that they're going to be backed by some like heroic music and some marches, and that's exactly where we start. Much more heavy bass brass is added in as the story introduces the attacking dragons, which follows suit to the instrumentations that the dragons received in past episodes such as Gauntlet of Fire, and actually uses the same exact leitmotif for Ember's father in this episode as well, when we see a dragon that pretty much looks exactly like her. Heroic French horns are added as Commander Ironhead hands Flash the fireproof shield. The score then returns to a march as Flash goes to take on the dragons, and it kind of transitions then to a more upbeat and fanciful heroic tune, like we've heard in past episodes like Rainbow Falls. We've heard similar tunes to this in that episode. As we hear that as he uses his shield to block the dragon's fire breath, and then it kind of ends with a very valiant cue as Flash saves the day. Here's that dragon theme. Very short cue, but that is the leitmotif from last season's episode. here he is getting the shield. We should be coming up with that more upbeat and valiant tune here. A very heroic ending to it, to the story there, of course. So we got one more track here. This is the ending track called Winsome Falls. This covers them finding that exit out of the back and finding themselves in Winsome Falls. The most noteworthy thing about this track is its concluding piece. It has a little concluding cue, which was actually just introduced a few episodes earlier this season. It sounds like it's a new sort of a new ending or lesson motif that we're getting now. It was previously heard in at the end, just a few episodes ago, in Discordant Harmony at the very end of that episode, and the track "We Make Sense to Me," when Fluttershy and Discord were talking at the end of that episode. So you might recognize it since it was pretty recent. So this is its second use in the series here. This version is a little more subdued, with the glockenspiel really taking the center stage, with the strings being a little softer than the version we heard last time. But before we get there, we got a few other parts we get to, as they're still in the cave. This is another motif that we've heard before in the series as well. And here comes that new sort of ending or lesson motif theme that we got a couple episodes ago in Discord at Harmony. You'll notice this time that theme doesn't have the shooby-doos from the teacups or whatever tea bags that we had in the its last appearance there. So that brings us into the score. So just amazing, episode with the score, and I'm disappointed that William Anderson isn't doing the movie score. Ingram and Caleb Chan and some of the other people that work on the songs, of course, are also doing the score for the movie, which is pretty much just like we would do for any of the musical episodes in the series. They're doing that, which I think sucks because I was really looking forward to hearing some of the show's themes on the big screen. But at the same time, it also means that being that Daniel Ingram doesn't have as much time to devote to the show and compose songs to it, it gives William Anderson a lot more to do in terms of composing music. So in that aspect, I'm happy that he isn't also trying to, split his time between that and this, so we can still get really great score like this from the series. And just some of the best score I've heard in the series yet. Seven seasons in here, so I've been listening to that Mistmane track nonstop since Saturday, pretty much, because it's just that good. So anyway, moving on from the music there. What does everyone think of the theme moral? Was there really any theme moral? I mean, each story kind of had its own sort of small theme, I guess.
Well, generally, the episode's theme is that adversity can lead to new adventures. But the only real specific moral that I got was from this main segment, in that it's not the beauty of your physical appearance or the things that you surround yourself with that matters, but rather the beauty that you put in the world through your actions and kindness. Also, don't be a dick.
So, favorite parts of the episode?
The laser dragon duel.
Yeah, pretty much just Mistmane's entire segment, just the music and everything. Although I will admit that the Rocco Village segment, that music got really good as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll have to say something astonishing here and say I think that the music was the best part of the episode. I mean, and that's saying a lot because the episode was really, really good, and especially that second story, I could easily say that entire second story was my favorite part because that was just amazing. But God, the music in this episode was just so good, and sometimes the music in the show is always good, but this is just on a whole nother level here in this episode. So. I wouldn't say it's the first time. There's been plenty of the time where the BGM has really kind of been a star of a scene or part of an episode, but yeah, it really does help, like, because it was that short story and the score was pretty much solidified with the entire story there.
I can kind of see where Tim's coming from on this in the sense that I could probably imagine everything happening just by listening to the music without, hearing any of the dialogue, without even really seeing any of the action on the screen. Just by listening to the music, I could probably, especially in Mistmane's part, I could especially see, just mentally envision in my head just everything that happens just by the music alone telling a story. Yeah. Just from its melody alone.
So, overall feelings, final thoughts, conclusions?
Kind of hope we get to see a little bit more of this. Not so much in terms of Vignettes or anything like that, but kind of like something like this where we get more of a music tells the story kind of thing, more communicative one. It's one of the it's actually a very decent episode. It's a really good standalone episode. Really can't rate this one, but it's a good one.
10 out of 10. No, I mean it's definitely I see where you're getting with it because it's definitely a different one. And going into it, I wasn't really sure how it would pull it off because you're doing a very kind of episodic episode, like with these three different stories, completely unrelated in it, and it kind of gets it could come off as being out of left field, just telling random stories, pulling stories out of her ass to tell, but they wound up wrapping it in a very good kind of good story with the whole camp thing going on and the continuity revolving around that. And each of the stories was enjoyable to watch on its own, and some of them even just absolutely stunning and amazing to watch.
And like I said in the chat room, I mean, I will admit again that I'm glad that they finally got around to tying into the comics as well. So some of our supplementary canon material ain't so supplementary anymore. I do also kind of want to see a little bit more, direction on this. I always love more world building, and I also love, I kind of want to see more, exploration of equestrian history. Even if it's just like more myths and legends, a lot of that just is kind of deeply ingrained in history as well. A lot of any culture you go to will have its own mythological and legends and everything like that. Whether it be Greco-Roman, whether it be Oriental, whether it be Native American, anything of that sort.
Definitely, and that's one of the things I really liked about this episode was seeing kind of these Asian influenced race of ponies in the episode. I really like seeing these different styles from different parts of the world outside of Equestria as well. And I like seeing what they do with the different looks that they have. And we've seen that in a few times in the show before, and I really liked it here. I thought the design was really good, and it was nice seeing some places outside of Equestria.
Like I mentioned before, and I've mentioned this before, what I would really like to see at some point in the future, if they can pull this off, I know that they had an idea at some point, like way early on, for a sort of a Big Mac style episode. Now, this doesn't have to necessarily include Big Macintosh, but just an episode that's like completely dialogue free, where it's just everything that you hear is just nothing but the backing score, just kind of driving the actions, kind of like those little old timey cartoons that were like all the supposed sound effects, the supposed everything is just nothing but just the background music, like the piano and everything. I would love to see them try to pull an episode off of like that. I doubt they'll ever will, but
you could for that entire that second short story, you could cut out Rarity's dialogue, I think, and all the other dialogue, and just show that music on front of the visuals, and I think you'd have almost the same impact.
Exactly.
I think that's the closest we've gotten so far to something like that.
Yeah, and that's why I say what I do. I mean, I kind of want to see if they would be able to pull that. I doubt they'd be able to do that for like an entire 22-minute episode, but for something like what the Equestria Girl shorts we've been seeing, if they could do something kind of like that, I would like to see that happen.
See, well, with that, I think that brings us to the end of today's episode here. So maybe if I can get this to respond. In the world. Yep, there we go. So thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Equine Episode Examination. Of course, we have another new MLP episode coming up this weekend, so we hope you'll come and join us to live chat with us during it at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Because it's going to be another potentially big, interesting episode. The title is "To Change a Changeling." So, more. we just had Thorax a couple episodes ago, so maybe alluding to this episode. I guess we'll see. But that's coming up this week. So next week, Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, we'll be back for another Triple E to discuss that episode, and probably we'll have a good amount to discuss about that one. And of course, this weekend we also are going to have a new episode of CQ Riffs, so we hope you join us for that around 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We'll be watching Cinderella 3: A Twist in Time, which just sounds like something that shouldn't exist by the title alone. So yeah, we'll be watching that on CQ Riffs this weekend, so hopefully you'll come and join us for that. So thank you all for joining us for everything today, and hope to see you then. Bye bye.
Take care, folks.
Later, folks.
Sorry, Jay.